Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sutcliffe and I've written some class collective worship resources for you to use this autumn. This reflective form of worship arose out of a need in my own classroom to make worship more inclusive and reflective. The resources I've created in response to the coronavirus pandemic should be easy to pick up and use. If you've got time to watch, this 10-minute video explains a bit more about the style of worship, how it's been designed, and some of my experiences from leading it. But I don't have all the answers, and of course in teaching, each of us brings our own skills, knowledge and personality to what we do, and that applies to how you will lead these as well. What is reflective class collective worship and why is it important? Reflective class collective worship offers time and space to gather as a class, to put learning to one side and to reflect, both as individuals and as a class community. It developed from a need in my own classroom to provide inclusive and reflective worship for children of all faiths and none, and that would promote their spiritual development. When I researched its impact, children really valued the time and space it gave them, and it helped them reflect on their experiences, past, present and future. In the current climate, with the great need to support children's well-being, opportunities to reflect on their experiences and chances to share their concerns raised by the coronavirus pandemic are vital. These worships all follow the same simple structure: an opening, a story stimulus, a response with open wandering questions, and a time to be creative, followed by a prayer and a clear ending. I'm going to briefly talk you through each of these 4 sections now. It might be helpful to have an example of one worship in front of you, but it's not necessary. The opening, creating a time and space. Children commented that it was good to be a class and to have a time like that. But we were always a class. We were with each other all of the time. What was different? It's important to set this time apart from the rest of the day. It's not learning. There are no right answers. Instead, it's a special time in a safe space, offering children the opportunity to reflect on what they need to. So how can we create this time and space? Only you can create and hold that atmosphere. They will learn from you. A soft tone of voice will help create an atmosphere, and allowing time for stillness and silence is incredibly valuable. But I found lighting a candle was transformative, providing children with a moment to stop and to focus. The words of the opening also make it clear that the class comes together with different personal beliefs and that all of those are welcome. The stimulus, a story. All these acts of worship use a story, some traditional stories, some from the Christian faith or other faiths, and some written for the current situation. The stories have been chosen as a response to some of the different experiences children may be dealing with: loneliness, friendship uncertainties, perhaps bereavement, or worries for the future. All have an element of what children may have lost and found during the coronavirus pandemic. The positives and the negatives they've experienced, the difficulties and the joys, the worries and the hopes. However, none of the stories are directly set in lockdown. It's to enable children to respond as they choose, depending on where they are in processing their experiences. A time of response with open, wondering questions. Following the story is a time of wondering. These are open questions, or I wonder questions, which show children that there are no right answers. Given the diversity of children's experiences from this time, they will have different responses, and hearing from others and sharing their own reflections will be really important. Choose 2 or maybe 3 of the I wonder questions to ask, the ones you feel more comfortable with and that you think are most suitable for the needs of your class. I would take maybe 3 to 5 responses for each question, although younger groups might be better to have more answers to fewer questions. If no one has anything that they want to share aloud, leave 10 seconds or so as a pause for personal reflection. Try to value all the contributions that are shared, and don't worry about filling any gaps with your own answers. Just let the silence do the talking. A time to respond creatively. The Children's Society has recommended choice and the creative arts for promoting children's well-being. So this is a really important aspect of the worship where they get to process and respond in the way they need to. It's great if you can offer lots of different creative resources, but most weeks I found I only had the time or the energy to get out the paper and pencils. There is always a suggestion for what children can do, but the key is that children can decide how they want to respond. I had a child who often sat in silence, especially at the beginning, but did choose to create something if they wanted. The process, that time to reflect, is more important than the outcome. It's okay to let children create what they choose, without asking them to explain their responses to you, although some may want to. I often thought the pictures my class drew weren't their best artwork, and I wasn't really sure what a piece of pizza and a football had to do with what we were reflecting about. But when I talked to the children for my research about what they'd created, there was nearly always a story from their life or an important thought going on underneath. At the end, I offered that the children could bring their response to the candle, though in these times they may need to leave them on their table. They kept them open if they didn't mind the rest of the class seeing, and folded them in half if they wanted to keep them between me and them. Of course, you may want to look at anything to check if there's something important the child may need to talk about. The ending. It's important to end and to close the time and space you've created. There's always a prayer written, but in such a way that you can make it a reflective thought if you or your school feel more comfortable with that. I then used a candle snuffer to create more smoke as you put out the candle, but you could just blow it out carefully. The words used remind children that all they've done and thought about in that time doesn't have to go away, but it can become part of their lives. After you finish, try to leave just a couple of seconds of silence and then transition into what comes next in the day. Some final thoughts. Some of these stories are intentionally leading children to reflect on some challenging topics, such as bereavement. You know yourself and your class best to know what is appropriate and at what time. Ask for support if you need it. These stories may raise issues that a child wants to discuss further, or they might say or draw something that concerns you. Always pass on any concerns you have to your safeguarding leads as soon as possible. And ask for support if an act of worship raises any needs you think your class or a particular pupil has. They're unlikely to be alone. Don't be afraid. There are no right answers for you either, and it's okay to say you don't know or that it's hard. Hearing that will probably be more helpful than you can imagine. And enjoy. I found the ideas and thoughts that the children shared could be incredibly powerful, and it was a wonderful time together. Leading class collective worship changed from being something I avoided to one of my favourite moments in the week. I hope you find the same.